it just for me didn't make political sense. And even if you were going to vote for me, there was no way you were going to vote for me because I came to ask you. It's probably because of stickiness. And so I prioritized more the people that I felt I could sway. It's sounding like the old age debate jargon of problem solution mismatch.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Shaft podcast. And today I have another long lost friend who I met in debate, got choked by the episode I had with Kelly, and so today he's here to vindicate himself. And it's been a long time coming, but finally you are here, Dela. So welcome to the Shaft podcast.
Thank you so much, Andrews. It's been an amazing time coming. And I really love this podcast. I've been a number one huge fan of this podcast. I've been watching it time immemorial. Yeah. And I want to say that, we had the conversation earlier, but that episode on, Kelly, that was quite interesting. I was there and he texted me. I was like, okay, let me go and watch what Kelly has said. It's like, okay, that's quite interesting. So I would love to have the conversation more and see, so thank you very much.
Yeah, but let's just get it out of the way. So Kelly and I did you small dirty, small, it's not plenty dirty, small dirty about, and I'm sure people will be looking forward to hearing it. There's much more interesting stuff down the line, so let's clear that bit of out of the way. What was really happening during that General Assembly meeting where I was adjudicator-in-chief at the time for KDS? I had intentions to run for president. Dela said I was going to rig, manipulate, cook up some things, meander my way around deciding who gets to vote so that it favors me during the election. And it pissed me off. So I want to know, obviously I never got to ask you why, because I didn't care, but you also didn't care whether or not I cared about what you were doing. So what was the intention behind it? Was it just usual petty Dela, or there was something much more behind that one?
Thank you very much for this question. First of all, Kelly and I are very good friends, very good friends. And of course, it's part of the game. When I was listening to the podcast, it was very interesting and intriguing. Yeah. And when I heard my name being mentioned around, first of all, around that area, I was like, that's quite interesting, But I also do want to say that I knew that, you were quite pissed, but I didn't know it was that much intense, because you said it's one of the things that you remember quite vividly well. Yeah. And for me, I didn't think it would have that much impact on you, even to this point, to this moment, about 10 years ago. But in answering your question, I do remember the time you were tipped as adjudicator-in-chief. And it was something that, was quite nice, because what you had seen coming out of the elections was the fact that Kelly had run for president. There was an NRA camp, and an NRA camp that really did not support Kelly in the beginning. Yeah. And, so having to bring you in as Andrews was something that was quite remarkable. It just showed how, Kelly wanted to work across board with, multiple parties and etc. Yeah. But at the time, it was quite interesting that you had aspects of running. And even though it was not public, it was something that was known from the NRA camp. And I do remember when, Isaac wanted to run, I think at the time you had also contemplated to do that, but you said, you know what, I think let Isaac have his moment, Yeah. So I did know that, or I was calculative on that, because of some of the things or the interactions that had gone around in the in the NRA camp. But for me, I just wanted to really understand the role conflict situation.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it might have gone far too ahead to suggest that you would rig elections. But
Yeah.
the Andrews I knew back then was quite a formidable person. And when he wanted to do something, he obviously stuck to his guns of doing it.
Yeah.
And so that was why I posed that question. And for me, it was two things. It was number one, clarifying your position,
Yeah.
building support from your constituents at the time,
Yeah.
you know, to buy into your ideals, So your reaction back then would have been, okay, blah 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 blah. I can step down, but I think, yeah, or it could have gone what you did, very haywire, walking out of the room, and it would have shown people the quality of leader that might have been elected and what that would mean for the society. And of
Yeah.
course, you went on that route. So, um, of course, typical of Andrew, of course, but it was, for me, it was just part of the game. It was nothing serious that I wanted to contemplate. But
That's what I told you.
in retrospect, I
Yeah.
did think that it was a gamble on your attempts at being a leader of a society that you really valued and you really felt
Yeah.
like you had to impact on. And I don't think things should have changed, but I do think that it all was also important to build your character as well as your momentum for the elections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was telling Kelly that deep down I knew that you were joking. Like, not, you didn't mean every bit of what you were saying to that extent. But I also knew that for whoever who was a neutral sitting out there, didn't know you didn't mean it to that extent. So for me, my reaction was not from what Dela meant, but what the other person sitting beside me was hearing. And that's why it pissed me off that much. And so the reaction was not, obviously, I know Dela. Dela jokes around, messes up with people, just triggers people sometimes. And it's a character trait that we all had in KDS at the time. But when it comes to, these are first years, Charlie, they are sitting there thinking, I don't really know Andrews. Now they are saying he can rig the election. If I go and tell them vote for me, Dela is financial secretary. Dela has reputation. Dela has influence in the society. Dela has a serious face describing these things, and he's not laughing. And you were doubling down over and over again. And for me, it was like, nah, at this point,
Yeah.
yeah. But to be very honest, it was one of the most defining moments in let's say, KDS politics for me. Mainly because when I came back to run, people judged me a lot on my reaction to that issue. Because, like, a constant thing that kept on coming up in the campaign was, you have anger issues because when Dela pressured you to say you were having conflict of interest and you were likely to manipulate something, you flared up. And obviously, I felt it was unfair because my reaction to that had nothing to do with having anger issues. If somebody has an outburst once in 3 years of being in a society, that's not a definition of someone who has anger issues. But that's politics. If you make one mistake, it's used to define you and define your character. And so that became a very huge part. And it was like a mountain to climb. If you people, one thing at the time that went against me as a candidate, a lot of them wouldn't say my commitment to debate or my quality or my determination or my leadership attributes, because at that time I was coming from Bielsa as president and I had to show for. And so the biggest thing it was that, and then an incident with Clinton. When Clinton was debating with me in training and BNI came around, that BNI wanted to debate. And Clinton said he wasn't feeling well at the time or something earlier before BNI came in. So I suggested to Clinton, you know what? If you said you weren't feeling well earlier, BNI wants to debate. So can you sit out for him to debate? He didn't say anything. He said, okay. He sat out. BNI debated. Later on, I realized he actually didn't sit. When he sat out, he didn't stay. He got pissed and left. So Vincent, Brain, and Prosper, and these other guys actually had to go to him and then go and speak to him that, it wasn't anything malicious or something. I met him later on, obviously told him, I didn't know that you really got pissed. And if you wanted to debate and you told me, I would have insisted that you debate. But because you had earlier expressed that you really didn't want to because you weren't feeling well, that's why I suggested. it defined my character in that campaign because it was used to conclude that I don't care about the development of young debaters. The only thing I care about is the big guns who come and speak. So if I truly care about young debaters, why did I force Clint? Why did I force, not suggest, not tell him, why did I force him to get off the stage for BNI to speak?
That that is quite interesting. And I just want people to understand the ecosystem that we were in.
Yeah.
The debate society at that point in time had individuals who were dinosaurs, and they were still roaming the earth after the Big Bang and the comets had landed. And they were dinosaurs in competing with the lions and the other food chains.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was quite interesting because even though you could say it was good for competition, it also meant a lot of people would be counted out. Yeah. People who were genuinely passionate about the sport, and people who wanted to improve. There was always some individuals who were behind doors, who were pushing people around, and people also felt left out. So the sense of being left out in itself was one thing that people wanted to use as a tool for having to come for people who the supposed dinosaurs had some favors for. And unfortunately, you would include the people who, the perception around that would include that you were the people who were favored by the dinosaurs. But to be quite honest, I was banging on the fact that you would have that reaction, because you having that reaction would mean that you would have less favorable odds in the elections. But it was quite remarkable how you came through to win, which for me, I think was very dubious as well, if we want to get into the details of that.
To be very honest, I think we can talk about that a bit. And I don't find that dubious. I find that petty. Very, very petty of me. I don't find that dubious. Because if you ask whether I was right to do it, yes. If you ask me whether I could have chosen not to do it, yes.
Yeah.
So that's
and I also do know you're a very logical person. Even when you want to make a decision, you want to weigh the facts and you want to really understand what is the merit of either side before you make a reaction. So that part of you was one that leaned more into the logic of having to, analyze to say that, he wants to be a little bit, of a comedian, but it's really hurting his reputation. So with that, you would exhibit those sort of qualities and characteristics. But I'm really talking about even to the build-up in your elections. The campaign was one that was quite anti-establishment. For some funny reason, you had made the administration into an establishment, and you were being anti-establishment. And I think that was quite brilliant for me, because at the time,
I was the one who was being branded before I started the campaign as being the establishment.
Exactly. So to have to flip it, to do an Uno reverse and say, no, the people who are the establishment are actually Kelly's people. And I was like, that was good, And of course you won. And I need to tell you this. You never campaigned to me personally.
Oh, I never did.
Yeah, but I was very happy when you won, because...
You know why?
Why?
So, in the election, I obviously came into the election very late. Especially when, first of all, Prosper was a hugely formidable candidate. And I think if I ran against any other person in that election, I would have probably gone into it feeling a lot more comfortable. But it was Prosper. Prosper had grown into the society. He had built up a reputation as the hardworking vice president. Kelly's administration was very conducive to the young ones. In fact, he pulled off the famous creating the alumni page and taking all the big guys off, just so that the young ones would have their space. So among the first years, the administration had a lot of popularity, right? And so coming into the election was a tough one, because you weren't just going against Prosper, you were basically going against the administration, and you needed to convince people that the administration is somehow different from Prosper, or lump them together and create an establishment narrative that you get to separate yourself from. And the thing with him was that when I came into the election, he had had almost a year as vice president campaigning. Basically, whatever he was doing as vice president was a pseudo campaign for him. Whatever I was doing in my leadership role at biological science, if I was doing for CISA or College of Science, that would have been a pseudo campaign for me. But here I wasn't going for College of Science. I was coming. So now I had to compete with somebody who basically has a history that I don't have. And I need to sell my history. He doesn't have to. So what I decided to do was I split the society into 3 parts. People that I just need to place one call and they would vote for me regardless of who I've spoken to them. People that no matter the calls I placed, I knew they won't vote for me or it would be hard to convince them. And then those who were in the middle. So what I did was I pulled the first yes and I told them, okay, which people did this person train? If I know this person has allegiances to this person, I can most likely trace where they are. So we had divided the society and the number of people we actively campaigned to were around 62 people.
Okay.
That's 62 people actively campaigning to them because they were either people who I knew would vote for me because I trained them or people that I knew didn't have any strong allegiance in the election. So it wasn't like if I had the time and if I was starting the campaign, let's say around the time that this General Assembly thing happened, and I was starting the campaign, I'll probably speak to you. I'll go out of my way to speak to Kelly. There are a lot of people I'll speak to. But because of the timelines, I said, look, I'm not speaking to people that I would need a lot to convince or that I already know would have a strong leaning to prosper.
Yeah.
And I was coming after your administration. It was senseless for me to go out there publicly and bash you and come privately and come and ask, would you vote for me? So Kelly will tell you, I never campaigned to him as well. Because it just for me didn't make political sense. And even if you were going to vote for me, there was no way you were going to vote for me because I came to ask you. It's probably because of stickiness. And so I prioritized more the people that I felt I could sway. And in the end, out of 62, 58 voted. And that's what took us to the next round. So which was a good result and at least a strategy that paid off in the end.
Yeah. And I think that was a very good strategy as well. But you didn't personally come to me to vote campaign for. But again, my decision to choose somebody for KD as president was also very complex as well. You might think that I was part of the establishment or whatever, but I do have my own interests. And the supposed names that you have mentioned,
The thing with you is that I don't think if anyone assumes they have your support, they are safe.
No, I'm sorry.
That's the thing. There's no on this earth who will tell me, oh, I have the less support. I don't need to speak to him and I'll go like, okay, sure, put it to bed. No, you don't.
No. Even if you are constantly with me in the same room and
exactly.
No, I'm sorry. There's a lot of things that goes into elections, and and the thing is, we know each other. I knew you from Queens from the first day.
Yeah.
Of course, we both had interesting, debate careers, but I cannot throw all of that aside. So
as well, we had a bit of a rivalry going on, even from first year training. Everything, Dela and Andrews are doing this. And the few times we partnered up, it was like two targets who have been put together in one team in training to debate. And then all of a sudden, it's like us against the rest of them because now there's no opposition or there's no fierce vibe around. And I mean, you and AC did really wonderful in that RP bar for going to the finals and all that. And from there on, you grew into the debate space, eventually became finance secretary. But I wanted to ask you though, like, how does it feel being the money guy? Because I know in an administration, people always go like, yeah, the president. But KDS has an executive council. And unfortunately for me, I've not had the opportunity to serve in another section of that situation. At Biosa, I was president. At KDS, I was president as well. And I tried to imagine how was your role as financial secretary and how much influence did you have within the administration when it came to making decisions?
So My role as financial secretary was not really tied to finance in the society. At the time Kelly was president, it was really a role that you were looking at having to look at the politics within the society and having to make key decisions around that. And even before we go into the finance bits and the budgeting, I do remember when Kelly was on your podcast, you asked him about the question around the selection for the awards.
Yeah.
And Kelly and I have had this conversation over and over again, but and sometimes it quite makes sense that he would want to attribute that decision to him because ultimately he made the decision. But at the time, and this is raw on the Sharp podcast, you will not hear this, because I am very transparent as well. Yeah. At the time, it was very difficult with the pants lists. There were back and forths with regards to that. People had their interests.
Yeah.
But because, they had been working towards this for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And Kelly being president was having a big issue around selection of names to go for worlds.
Yeah.
And he did not want to make the mistake that was made by, the predecessor.
Yeah.
Of having to act out in a very funny and quite disingenuous way.
Yeah.
So he came to the executive council board to have a meeting before the KDS meeting.
Yeah.
And at that time it was the executives. Yeah. And he said that he was going to put out the list.
Okay.
In front of the society. That was what he said.
Okay.
But at the time I said that, listen, this is democracy for the people, by the people. So what you have to do is you have to go to the people and make them have suggestions to make that vote. And initially, Kelly was against that idea.
Yeah.
Somebody else was against that idea. And I was the only one who was actually advocating for this position.
Yeah.
And I was advocating for it. And Kelly said he wanted to step out and make a call. So he stepped out and make a call. Of course, I'm probably sure there were people in the background who he was also consulting. But when he came back, the decision was made that, at that meeting, he would open it up for people to have to vote for.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't want to claim that I was the one who, because I was not the one who told the society, but I was the one who said to do this because this is the better direction, and it's quite unfortunate that, he credits himself, for that. But I would say that it is, I wouldn't even credit myself for that. I would say that it is the society and the administration at the time who credits herself for that.
Is this your little comeback at Kelly for doing you small dirty?
Kelly knows, he knows.
I was waiting for when you do something like this. I nearly asked, when you're about to do him dirty, tell me, but I didn't even have to ask. You've just done it.
No, but I think that's like the character or the quality of Kelly that I really love.
Yeah.
Is the fact that he wants to make people involved in decision making. Yeah. And that's very, very important, as to how he creates a narrative around that and how that furthers his position. That's something that, because I don't even see myself as a politician, in the first place. But yeah.
Imponi, Dela.
I don't think myself as a politician.
I've not said you. I've just asked Imponi.
Imponi, yeah. Because for me, it was very important. The administration before Kelly was one that was quite distasteful, for me. I don't know of others, but it was very distasteful for me. And we were the first republic. So, it was very, very important to put out that as a first republic, we need to set the precedents for others to follow.
This is the first time I've heard that administration referred to as the first republic.
Of course, we were the first republic. Is there any, doubt around that? The administrations before that were, hereditary, hierarchical. Exactly. But we were the first republic elected by the people for the people. you know.
Maybe small Kwame Nkrumah's of KDS. Hey. Wow.
First constitutionally elected administration of KDS.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fact. So
yeah. But if we're going into the finance bit, a lot of people don't know this, but I have a pure science background. I did biology, physics, chemistry, and fountain.
yeah, it's always
And
why you want to do business admin.
Thank you. It was a lot of stories behind that, but basically, I said, "Give me business, give me finance, give me accounting," and I sat in that class whilst juggling all the other things I could juggle on campus.
Yeah.
So for me, what was very important was getting the experience within that field.
Yeah.
And at the time, I also did have political intentions of running for the College of, Humanities and Social Sciences under the notorious name DDT.
Dominio de Latin Plus.
Exactly, which was quite very funny, but I ended up pulling out because as I told you, I am not a politician. Not because I wasn't favored, but because exactly in the time I felt it was a reaction to my failures within the society. Oftentimes in a society, if people do not have that much of debate laurels or good in the debate room, they often go outside, and mostly what they do is they end up being politicians. And I felt it was just like a hook, line, sinker. I needed to find who I was. Okay. And so it was a difficult decision, but it was a decision that I stuck to, and it was a decision that I took to actually back out of the race. So at the time, when the KDS elections were going on, I think Ida called me. I had a few and they're like, because I was really out of KDS at the time. Yeah, yeah. And so it's like, you should run for financial secretary. And during the vetting, she was the same person who had to nail me down to tell me, listen, you have not been in this society. We have not seen what you are doing. What makes you think that you are capable to become an executive, much more a financial secretary?
Ida is just a genius.
I was like, okay, mother. Thank you, mother, for that input. But I think, it really made me very retrospective because it also showed that at the point in time, people didn't believe in me.
Yeah.
And to obviously have to not be participative in a debate society was one that was quite disappointing for people to see. So even if nothing at all, playing my role as a financial secretary would cement that position.
Yeah.
So it was something that I welcomed, and it was something that I did. Now, as to the role of being a financial secretary in the institution, this was a role that, to be quite honest, had a lot of strings attached to the role.
I see.
Because the era around which I was a financial secretary, you need to understand, it was pants, it was worlds, and people were quite, for lack of a better word, vigilant over funds and how those funds were being used with regards to the administration. So even the budgeting that I did was a budgeting that was not consulted in the first place. Money for disbursement for per diems or DSAs that I was supposed to be in charge of. I was subvented for that role. Yeah. And for me, I really did not care about it because people had taken those competitions to be their babies for the past, 10 years ago. So if they felt like their only ways of control was to control money, it was nothing that, really bothered me. At that point in time, to be quite honest, I really wanted to see what I would do outside of the debate society and how that would look like. So of course I made, key inputs on budgeting and etc. But yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, speaking to you now, I sort of just hear how much you really loved the society, and you'd probably, I don't know, in an alternate world, wish your engagement in the society would have been more than it is.
Yes, I really did wish my engagement in society would have been better. Yeah. But for me, I think I became quite reactionary and emotional in the early ages of the society. because I felt I was entitled to certain things because I was good initially. So
You added initially to you being good. You were good. End of story. Continue.
So and people really do have to understand that to succeed in a debate world, you have to be very political. It is a strategic partnership with people. And sometimes it's not even what you say, it is the image that you know. And I've been saying this several times.
The thing is that that's a part that I was either oblivious to or never knew how to do it until much later. Like by much later, I mean somewhere 2020, 2021 is when I understood that, look, there's a lot more politics involved in debating than just you.
A lot more politics involved in debating. And of course, I do not have malice to, those individuals. But if we were being honest, it was a hierarchical structure of people who had seen gods and wanted to be like gods. And those gods had the privilege to choose who to partner with to make like themselves as gods. And I was watching your podcast, and then somebody was like, there was this one person who really would not have gone far in debate until I partnered them. It just shows you how they felt they had so much power and determine what a person's debate career would be like. And obviously, that was how it was. When I heard him say that, I was like,
the person's name. What is this? I like violence.
So they can go and watch the podcast. It was a podcast on the Shaft. It wasn't from the Shaft together, with Erasmus and somebody else. And and that was it. And that was what I had to be in. I had to be in this state of having to have this anguish and anxiety of, okay, does this person see me worth enough to partner me? Okay, if this person does not partner me, what does it mean for me? And some people say, it's not just partnerships, but of course, it was like that. Of course, until you grow in this debate society and you're more witty and more intelligent. And you're more witty and more intelligent to carry your arguments around. And for me, that was when I realized, because it just makes you very good. So, as time moved on, you were quite brilliant. The others were quite brilliant, and etc. And that was how come the KDS society had stood the test of time, because of the intense level of engagements, as well as
I think to be fair, like when we came into the society, people were good though. Because I remember the very first training session I had at Queen's was a training that happened at the, I think, IT room. Then it was Bannerman delivered a speach.
Lovely.
All the big guys, Ida, Lampa delivered a speech and he was last. But Bannerman delivered a speech. And I was listening to this guy, whom I was told was a first year, delivering the speech, and I was like, God, when? Because, bro, he sounded so elite.
It was so good. It was so good. And even in that year, I did, because Bannerman was being trained by Kofi Chum. I did go to that debate, and it was, it was just brilliant. They were all good. Bannerman, Isaac, Bangola, God, I missed that name. But so it was brilliant at its peak. So yeah.
Like, I don't know how people those years tormented.
Oh my God.
To go and learn.
Oh my God.
The reason why I would go and sit in my room and be watching 3 hours of documentary on Israel-Palestine conflict was because I'd heard Bannerman debate some debates there, and I'd heard Dela give some analysis, which I'm sure probably Dela never read the fact. But
I didn't.
And I felt pressure. Probably Bannerman doesn't know that 90% of the things he's blabbing out there. But the pressure he placed on people to go and learn and just get better. And I think that was a huge part. Like, there are things I learned within that period. I obviously didn't understand them, but way down the line, they changed a lot about what I knew and how much I could argue in certain motions.
Exactly. And I also want to say that for our badge, I don't know the others, but you could see that you were in the midst of greatness,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even after school, even in school, you could see it. It
Yeah.
was just beautiful brilliance,
Yeah.
beautiful ideas, beautiful people, beautiful energy that just loved to be witty,
Yeah.
and who really were quite ambitious,
Yeah.
with their interests and their passions.
Yeah.
And so with that, it of course there will be competition, but
Yeah.
you could also understand that this person needs to have their moment, and
Yeah.
this person would also have their moment.
Yeah.
So that was something that I just feel
You
like it
remember
was
how JJ used to bully us in training?
oh Lord, my God.
All night trainings, Charlie. Hey,
It was just so fun. I do remember quite
it was like
recently.
military rule.
It was like, and there was sometimes he would just be asleep.
Yeah,
And
he's sleeping.
yeah, he's asleep. Exactly. He's asleep, and we would have to, and we have to
When we are done with
analyze.
the debate, then we'll call him, we'll wake him up. JJ, we are done. He'll give you another motion, then he'll be asleep.
JJ was on heat, JJ. Hey, at that time, JJ was also SLC PRO or something like that.
JJ was national champion.
Thank you.
And was captain of the society.
Thank you.
Bro,
thank you.
Aura bundled into one personality. You are not scared. I remember one time he gave us an assignment and none of us did it, and he got pissed. He walked out and said, until we are done and apologize, he's not coming back.
Not coming back. And we're all like, what should we do? What should we do?
We're scared, mortified.
We're very scared. And JJ had so much power because he even had power, to call the president of the Queen's Hall to make sure we got rooms.
Yes.
And if we didn't get rooms for it, he would just walk out. Because he's not about exactly. He's not about that life.
Like the person I didn't like in our trainings, I always tell him was Erasmus. We are there. JJ finishes training and then we go home. Erasmus comes, then he'll tell you topics to read, and then he'll just sit and lift his head and then start listing topics. You leave training with like 20.
Oh my God. And you're like, what is he talking about? And at that time when they spoke, you go like, what are they saying? Because you
don't understand anything. What are these guys even talking about?
Your mind even cannot analyze what they're saying, So that was, and we knew that bar was very high. Yeah. And for me, I do really love the fact that people like you and the generations that I've seen have really kept that bar and have moved that bar. Yeah. And have done it so graciously, graciously, unlike how the others did it. They have done it so wonderfully.
The line shots.
And for me, that is something that's quite worth emulating. So thank you very much for raising that bar so graciously. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, like there are lots of people who raise that bar. You look at Abna winning PADC with
PADC. Exactly.
Kojo going on to win nationals twice. Prosper going on to win PANs, to be in World's finals. You have Erasmus winning PANs twice, breaking at Worlds for the very first time as a Ghanaian team into the quarterfinals. And then I think the next year we made semifinals, or the next 2 years we made semifinals with Prosper and Vincent. Then Vincent went ahead to make finals. Then Opana last year in Vietnam also made finals. So like the bar just kept shifting, and it's way above my head now because I can't call myself a Worlds finalist. But Prosper, Kojo, Opana, Vincent are Worlds finalists, right?
That is...
And these are the people who are training the next generation. So obviously, the next generation are aiming higher to go there. They find it much more comfortable now to say, I can make a Worlds final. I can win if I push a lot harder. And they were like runners-up in the Worlds final this last year. And so you look at it and the standards have shifted. Like during our time, somebody speaks of Worlds and you're like, what's that?
And you're like, what is he saying? How is that even possible?
We
were watching Bocio videos for training.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And today we have people who go there and then go and make the finals and just break barriers, Charlie. So
that is remarkable. That is something that I don't even think people 10 years back would have even thought of.
No. No.
I don't think so.
Like the very first Africans who went to Worlds went as observers.
Wow.
So you can they went to observe.
Wow. They went to observe.
Yeah. They didn't go and debate. They didn't even go and do public speaking. They went to observe. And now you have people challenging for the title. So it's really, really huge. But let's pivot into something that eventually took your attention away from KDS for a while, which is first let's talk about Enactus. It's created pressure for me when I was in school because
really
people in Enactus made you feel like you were missing out on this entire universe that is there. That if you are not there, you are not part of the creme de la creme. That the debate society was a cult, but Enactus was a world of geniuses. Like, how was Enactus really, and what was it?
First of all, very glad Enactus made you feel like that because it just shows you how you are so not indispensable on Kenyan.
Masa, hey, be careful.
This is me speaking as an actor and a debater, by the way.
I know, right?
But yeah, Enactus, how did I get into Enactus? Right. So, Enactus, I got into Enactus by Kofi Chum. Kofi Chum at the time was in Enactus a year. And I think Kofi Chum had gone to Worlds, I think the previous year or so. But I was not serious with Enactus because I was with debate, And at the time, I did think Enactus was, Enactus also goes for national competitions.
Yeah.
And I went for a national competition and I missed that. And I went for a debates competition. And the next year, what Enactus did was that Enactus has HR, Head of Human Resources. They just printed a list of names that said, these people are not going. They are not more part of this society. And I think at the time, we were having debate nationals and Enactus nationals around that time. Yeah. So for me, and I really had a very personal relationship with the HR.
Yeah.
Barbara.
Her name was still on the list.
Exactly. So listen, I said, well, my debate career is not going anywhere. So let me explore because Enactus again was more business related. You were doing projects, you were pitching your projects. It was and of course, if you do know how to speak, as I have afforded the training in debate, it would be quite easy to pivot in Enactus. So I said, let me see what this has for me. So I jumped into Enactus. I was like, okay. Then I joined the presenters team. And when I joined the presenters team, it was like that. It was so easy for me because the presenters team was a team that was responsible for writing scripts to pitch for the national competition.
Okay.
And when I joined the team, I was very, very good. I was selected to be a presenter. And then I went to my first nationals in Enactus. I actually pitched and I won.
Wow.
For the national competition. Yeah. And at the time, debate people were calling me, where are you? What? I think I had to come down.
Yeah.
I was having a cough, but I had to fake being so sick that they had to put me in a tech clinic. And I think I was shaking, but I don't know if it was me intentionally shaking or the body was, sometimes things fight. But of course, I came to do debate. But I had won an Enactus Nationals. So, I mean, a debate nationals was not even, But yeah. The thing about Enactus that I really loved and that gave me the opportunity was that it was a society that was, of course, there was competition, but it functioned very differently.
Yeah.
In the fact that you were working on projects, you had experience on projects, green projects, and you could learn on how to have this for the corporate world.
Yeah.
So of course, debates, you'd have argumentations, you'd have all of that. But Enactus was a way in which you could apply a sort of training to what you're doing.
That was the thing that pressured me about it because at the time it was obviously now I work in debate full time and it's like I can see the business side of debate much more clearly. But at the time, I couldn't for the life of me see anything business or career related.
Yeah.
So it felt like Enactus was more valuable if you were somebody who were thinking about your future. Like they tell you debate.
Really?
Yeah, they tell you debate gives you skills, right?
It does.
You sit and think, okay, yeah, if I know how to talk, then what? Right? And it's not like people in the outside world cared which BP competition you had done or which internals you had won. But if you do projects, you know how to pitch, you have this experience, you have that portfolio behind you, it gave you much more credibility. I attempted to join Enactus once, I think somewhere in third year or so. I inquired about the application process, everything, probably started but never finished.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I
Andrew.
didn't feel I could commit to both at the same time.
Yeah.
But like it gave me a really tough time in terms of whether or not debate was the best thing to do in school if I really wanted a career outside of school, or which group was going to give me a much more formidable career outside of school. Like in hindsight, obviously, I don't regret not leaving debate, but at the time, and I think it's one thing that we need to repackage about debating. I don't think it's enough to simply tell people it teaches you how to speak without telling them exactly what that speaking or what that construction of thought does for them. Because for a lot of people, and I think that's why we lose members a lot, because for a lot of people, at some point, it becomes just shouting for 7 minutes every weekend and nothing really out of it. And if you do it for a term or for a semester or for 2 semesters, if you don't do it for the next 6 semesters of school, what do you lose?
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. But if I practice every single year, I do a new project, I work on a new project, and I do a presentation, and I have that on my CV, or I get to build a portfolio from that. That has a much more guided trajectory to development than probably debate has, aside the experience you get for competitive competitions. And so it's really a tough dilemma for me at the time.
Yeah, and I also think I need to say this. At the time when I was in debate, the dominant narrative was the fact that debate is a sport.
Yeah.
And I really hated that narrative.
Even now, it's still a narrative around it.
Wow, I really hated that narrative.
Yeah.
When you tell people debate is a sport, you are putting them in a military regime to just go out and, go and have trophies and come and or brag with that. Of course, there's a lot of egotism that comes with that, But when you look at how a person could use the knowledge from debate, and I tell you, debaters in every space that has to do with communication, that has to do with articulation, they excel. They excel. Even when you are walking on the normal streets and you have a very nice conversation, people go like, "Oh my God, who is that?" There's this thin presence that you have by just having to speak in a way that debaters speak.
This podcast, the confidence to do it is just because I've spoken for 4 years in school, debating every single day. I'm like, yeah, I can talk to anyone. So let's go.
Thank you.
Right. I'm not sure any other person, or I'm not sure if I didn't have a debate background, I would be bold enough to sit and have conversations with people.
Yeah. And like that needs to really, really, really be mentioned. Debates gives you the opportunity to be somebody that, you could never, ever have dreamed of.
Yeah.
And, to reduce it to just being a sport is something that for me is quite questionable. But anyways,
I can't help but mention something. And I mean, you can choose to decline to talk about it, but I feel like when we're in Queen's Hall, one of the things that was very noticeable about you at the time was that you used to stammer a bit.
Yeah.
And it was very evident whenever you were speaking. Since we started this conversation, I've not heard you stammer.
Oh, Lord.
And it's almost an hour into the conversation. And I'm wondering, did debate have anything to do with it? But even beyond that, was there anything specific you did to get you out of that? Because I'm sure there are people outside there who would also be interested in how to overcome that aspect of their lives. Because there are a lot of people who find it a challenge, and the annoying part is people look down on people sometimes because of that aspect of their lives. And just listening to you now, just drawing my attention to it is like, wow, listening to Dela speak like this, I'm sure back then would have been like a surprise, right? And beautiful to see.
Thank you. Well, no. So I am a naturally born stammerer. When I was young, I was those people that when I'm talking, I have to stamp my feet or hit just to make a speech.
Yeah.
And it really affected me. Of course, along the way, I did manage around, but every time that I was very anxious or had anxiety, it would just come. It would really just come. And sometimes you just know something, but you literally are having roadblocks to have, having that thing come out.
Yeah.
And debate was a huge part of that. I would say public speaking was a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Because the thing that came with my stammering was the uncomfortability that I felt when I stood in front of people. And the sort of low self-esteem that I felt. So having to have an opportunity to speak publicly, making sure I have every control of the process, making sure people really enjoy who I am in person and not being pressured to make it whatever it was, it just afforded me the opportunity to be able to, first of all, listen to myself when I speak, and secondly, have to, make sure that, I'm speaking in a way that makes everybody understand. And it also comes with a calmness within. And I quite recently, I'm learning French, so I speak French. And initially when I started learning French, it was very much, I was stammering. But along the way, I had to, recenter myself and be like, no, we've been in this position before. How did we move on past it? So now, I speak very fluently French as I do, speaking English. So, stammering was one of the main things that for me was a big issue. Even within debate sports and debate spaces, because sometimes too, I would have my points to say, but I could not get them in to talk to them detailed because I was preoccupied with the fact that I was stammering. So, and of course, putting me in that position, putting me on the spot, 7 minutes ago, whatever, you just kind of get used to this thing of having to make sure that, you are obviously getting out of the fear. So it was something that I really, really loved. And that's it.
That's really interesting and very inspiring as well, because like the way I try to imagine it is sometimes even when I am speaking, there's something I want to say, I can't quite remember it. And it's annoying because just 10 seconds ago, I remembered what it was. And it's like a flash, it's gone in my mind. And you're like, and you see people who experience that just visibly pissed. And we are just people who just experience it for like once in a blue moon. Right? So for me to sit and imagine that that's somebody's experience every single time they want to speak, it's like I can't imagine what that person is going through and what you were going through at the time. So it's really exciting for me. Like it just dawned on me and I was like, there's no way I would have thought this would happen back then.
Yeah. And I also want to also say that so it came to a point in time in debate where I was so good at being an MP. Sorry, a PM. Was it?
PM. Prime Minister.
PM. And I had to be so good because when you're a PM, you're the first person who speaks. And with the stammering, when you do, ladies and gentlemen, the motion before the house, whatever, it needs to sound in a certain way. So I do remember I will be in my room and I'll just be practicing independent judges, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just be doing that over and over and over again because I knew if I get the first two lines right, without stammering, I can go. It's like you're running a 100-meter sprint. If you get the start right, you can go. But if the start, then you're like, oh, crap. So that was it.
Wow, that was a nice thing to talk about, especially now that you've been able to work and overcome it. And like you speak so fluently, I'm jealous.
Are you kidding me?
I'm jealous. No, I'm serious. Like, see, there are people who speak and it commands attention. Like people who are enjoyable to listen to, right?
Yeah.
And you are one of them.
Oh,
so
thank you.
To have that fluency and flow added to it, it's like, bro, I envy you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Back to Enactus, you mentioned something about green projects, green.
Yes.
And now I know you study, but also you pursued things around the climate sector and the climate area of studies in recent times. Was that inspired by your time at Enactus with some of the projects you worked on? Or was it really just post-school you sat and realized this is a thing I'm passionate about, and I want to venture into it?
Right. Thank you very much for that question. So Enactus gave me the opportunity to immerse myself in green projects. So green projects, for clarity, are projects that are aimed at climate mitigation and climate adaptation.
Yeah.
That look at sustainable ways of, production. It could be in the space of agriculture, energy, etc. And those projects are projects that are literally being done by Enactus, because what we are communicating a means of having to stand on the SDGs and make sure that we are one step closer to the Paris Agreement or the Paris Accord.
Yeah.
And for that, we need to make sure we sell the ESG innovativeness of our project. And of course, I was in Enactus, won Enactus National, I think 2 or 3 times. Did work like twice, but virtually, and because of COVID, etc. But I do remember when I was in 3rd year in university was when I went for the presidential pitch with green projects, and of course I was first runner-up for that. So that was won when I was in school, and then immediately outside of school, I also went for the circular economy competition, which was done by GH1. I was on TV for that. Listen, that circular economy competition, the first time that they interviewed me on TV, I was stammering.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was stammering, and it was so bad that they thought I did not have any, what's it called? Any, I could not win the competition, or I did not have any prospects in the competition. Yeah. So, yeah. So I came back, and God, I nailed them. Oh my gosh, I've never been so aggressive in my life before. And sometimes the videos are on YouTube. Sometimes I just go and watch myself. I was like, oh, really? I did that. It was like that. It was like that. And it was a lot of KDS and Enactus experience, because after you've pitched, you have to answer questions from judges, and you have to be smart on your feet. You have to apply all these business principles, and all of that. So when we won the Circular Economy National Competition, that was when I started to, make sure that, I needed to find my niche within, this space and try to, do something for myself. And one thing that I really, really loved, was the idea of having to own something and work at it by myself. I don't necessarily like to work for people.
Yeah. And
so that was what made me to found E-Organics, which is an agri-tech company that is making sure we deliver agricultural extension services, but digitally to smallholder farmers.
Yeah.
And in 2023, we got the opportunity to be funded by the Australia Direct Aid Grants Program to do a pilot project in 3 farming communities in Ghana.
Okay.
And we are actively working with these 3 farming communities in Bewenum, Obuatre, and Fianco in the Ewutisenya East constituency.
Wow.
And through that, I gained a lot of experience, because when I was out of school, of course, I did my service, but I go back to my business again.
Yeah.
And I was in my business for 1 year up until I went to school again in September.
Yeah.
So, so with that, kind of juggling the 2 of them together. And then this year as well, I've been awarded, the Youth for Climate grant under the UNDP, which seeks to scale up the business.
Yeah.
So, and, again, I'm still in school. So you also have to figure out how to, develop that, traveling back and forth. But basically, that sort of mind or mentality to actually go out to the world and produce a solution and pursue that solution relentlessly, irrespective of what your mates are doing. My mates who I completed accounting with went on to get, accounting certifications. And of course, I working for the big 4s like EY and etc. But I'm like, no, we need to do this, and we need to do it well. That sort of ambition and drive is one that I got really from Enactus, as well as, KDS. And that is something that I'm really, really proud for, especially given my background, because it has not been easy at all.
I always respect people who are bold to be different, right? Because there's always this ridiculously stupid pressure of, especially in Ghana, finish school and go and work and be in a tie and go to office every single day and do this and do that. And I'm like, when I finished biological sciences, all my mates either applying for scholarships to go and read biological, some master's degree in biological science, or working at the research labs or at a hospital lab or at some pharmaceutical company. And they're like, why don't you want to be in the field? I'm like, I really don't want to. So my national service, for instance, I didn't even look for any biology place to go. I aggressively went to apply to private firms that were doing nothing in relation to biology. So that's how come I ended up doing my NSS at Bolt Food, their headquarters in Accra, as an operations analyst. So I was doing data analysis and Excel sheets and just setting up stuff. Plenty had nothing to do with biological science, and I really loved it.
Interesting.
I didn't want to be in biological science, even though I'd done the degree. And then before I could even end my NSS, I was applying for debate-related roles outside, got an offer, and I said, yeah, I actually want to be in debate education, and then moved and started doing debate education, which is a whole new, different way of education that is different from the traditional means of going sit in a classroom, learn science or math or something. So it is more of you are creating the educational space as you are going on because there is no preset structure as to so you are actually innovating while you do it. And it's probably the most exciting part of the work I do. And for me, so fulfilling. I'm happy for those who stayed in biology, but I'm glad that I was bold enough to separate myself from it and not be trapped into it. And so listening to you talk about finishing accounting, because I know everybody in accounting school will tell you, yeah, I'm a certification.
ICA or ACCA, yeah, exactly. People were even doing it in second year in school.
Yeah, while they are in school, they are doing the certification courses. And so to see you take on a course that you actually believe in and are so passionate about, like, mad respect from this side, because there's so much boldness that comes with doing it that a lot of people struggle to. And sometimes it's like even just convincing family that this is something that you should allow me to do and trust me to do it. Like, imagine going to do biological science and saying, Mikochiri debate. Like, are you okay?
and of course, Andrew, I knew your background as well as one that, because you were quite smart in your senior high school. That is how come you pivoted into university. Yeah. And of course, you were making sure that, you had a stability, if I should say. Of course, you were doing your debating. It was wonderful. Yeah. But for you, I think the core of it was a stability. So having to really pivot around something that you really loved as debate and having to have that to be wholly accepted by your family, I will quite imagine was something that, was quite shocking for them. Yeah.
That's the thing. And it's what you are saying. From where I was coming from, you couldn't take risks because there was no cushion when you fail. And so it's like, take the traditional path, which is low risk, find your stability first, and then maybe later on you can think about some wild that you want to do. But to right from the start, dismantle that stability and say, I'm going rogue, bro. the presentations and explanations you have to do in this life.
Oh gosh, and I don't know this, but one major characteristics of mine has been to be very stubborn, very out of the box person.
Yeah. I think at some point when they realize that you are just good at what you do,
exactly,
they accept
it.
But from the start, it's always hard.
It's always, very, very shaky. So I just want to say, if you're out there and you are doing something that you really love and you think you want to take it further, I think you should take it further.
Yeah.
I think you should take it further.
Just one final question on the climate bit. There are so many different solutions models around. I've been sort of obsessed with climate science for whatever reason. So I just watch videos, read about. There was one video I watched, which was a series produced by Al Jazeera, which piqued my interest because it was like questioning whether or not every single solution model we see out there even works. So, for instance, recycling, it was talking about the fact that the majority of plastics that you can't even recycle, the majority of plastics that you can only recycle like about 2 or 3 times. And after that, it's no more recyclable. So it still ends up at waste anyway. And it's like, if really the solution models that we are seeing around are not really that effective, why are we being told stories that are compelling that we should prioritize them, fund them, be aggressive with them? Are they really going to work? Because obviously the climate crisis is real. And we should be concerned if these solutions are not really that effective. So recently, it's one of the reasons why I came to you to ask about the episode to begin with, because I'm just looking for people to have conversations around climate issues and what really is going on within that industry, because I also know the media can be biased sometimes. So the question I wanted to ask is, what made you settle on the project and the path you've taken now? And what really is the end goal in terms of the impact that you are creating, such that people don't just look at it as Dela is on an entrepreneurial journey, but I'm sure there's something deep down that drives this agenda within the climate space. And I just want people to understand exactly what that is and what the end goal would be.
Okay, so I think your question is quite layered.
Yeah.
But let's start and then let's just drop. So after the Paris Accord, the world as a whole sat down and said, the earth is becoming too warm. We need to find a way to mitigate or to adapt to global challenge issues.
Yeah.
And the point of adaptation or mitigation was making sure we kept issues like ecosystem services. So ecosystem services are basically provisioning, supporting, regulating, and cultural services that we as humans, we get from the environment or from ecosystems. Part of it was also making sure that we are preserving ecosystems. So whatever heavy capitalistic exploitation or productivity that humanity is involved in, we do it in a much more sustainable way that makes sure that we are not completely destroying the environment.
Yeah.
And with that, the Accord mandated developed countries to support developing countries in the fight against climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. Why? Because developed countries were more in the position to have funds to do that because of the ongoing exploitations that they have done in the past for a very long time. But it's secondly, most of the ecosystem services that we benefit from the environment are services that can mostly be found in undeveloped countries. Because in those undeveloped countries, you do not necessarily, you have individuals like local communities and local groups who have philosophies that are tied more to the earth. And so with things like consumption and etc., they are much more careful with them. So with that, we as humans were now facing the issue of having this huge money that is coming from undeveloped, from developed worlds, coming to finance, grant and mitigation, climate mitigation issues in the undeveloped worlds. And with that, we needed to understand where that money was coming from, how that money was being used, and whether it's creating that much impact. Yeah. And of course, one of the main issues around which projects around climate mitigation or climate adaptation is concerned about is, two main issues, is green grabbing and greenwashing.
Yeah.
Green grabbing in the sense that you have multinational organizations that are within local communities that are seeking to change or bring projects, but at the same time, they are displacing people of their livelihoods, of their cultures, and of their lands. A perfect example is this project that went up in DRC Congo. The women were trekking in miles to go and fetch water. Okay. And, there was this project that said, let's come and let's, dig a well and let's pump everything in the local community. The women were very pissed because waking up in the morning and trekking to go and fetch water was something that was cultural. If they were in the house and they could get water in the house, what would happen would be the fact that they would constantly be engaged in domestic work and they would constantly be burdened by it. So having that much of trekking, gossiping, and etc. was like watching TV for them. Yeah. It was like, exactly. Exactly. There's also another project whereby people wanted to really invest within carbon stocks and carbon sequestration. Yeah. But at the same time, what they wanted to do was they wanted to remove the local community from the forests and then, do this reforestation thing, plant a whole bunch of forests and displace the local communities completely from where they were.
Yeah.
So this form of green grabbing is one that has a Western view on how to monopolize the idea of introducing climate mitigation and climate adaptation projects that do not take into consideration local participation or, anything, or local participation, local stakeholders, anything like that. So that's like one huge problem that comes with that. But mostly that problem is from multinational organizations who think they know better. They don't do a feasibility study or cross, broad stakeholder consultation, and they, and enact their projects. The other thing too would be greenwashing. That is in the sense that you have projects that are purported to create impact, but when you look at the impact that has been created, it's actually something that really doesn't make sense, or there's actually nothing happening. This is projects that money have been given, and people are actually squandering that money. But time in, time out, they report that we're doing this wonderful thing, we're doing this thing, but nothing is being done. It's like that book, which written by Dambizo Moyo around legal aid in Africa.
Yeah.
Where you create this problem and you constantly maintain the problem with no impact, but constantly you go to people and say, we are doing this gorgeous work, give us more money, and we're going to do more upscale. That is very, very difficult to also, have a conversation around. And then we are looking at how you can create market-based mechanisms where you can trade with carbon, and how that could invite privatization to make sure that we are valuing or undervaluing carbon, and how that valuation or undervaluation of carbon is going to be a key indicator in creating, reducing global temperatures. Now, with those carbon markets, people do not often understand that they are often capitalistic interests that come when you have market-based mechanisms, because traditional market-based mechanisms are one that reward profits as an incentive versus having to look at the earth. Because when you see the earth and ecosystems, you cannot make a direct valuation of ecosystems to say this is 2 billion or 300 CD dollars, because of the intricate ways in which it supports life and how we are benefiting from ecosystems for people and etc. So the idea of having to trade in carbon without, number one, even creating local market-based economies for local communities to participate, but inviting private entities to participate in carbon would mean that governments lose control, and would mean that private individuals commodify carbon to an extent whereby somebody who has Coca-Cola in the United States could pollute more than whatever, and he can come to you and say that, listen, I have carbon credits in the Congo, and the Congo is sequestration 3, never minding the fact that once you release that much carbon into the atmosphere, it causes a global phenomenon of climate change that directly would mean that places like Europe and etc. would also be affected. So this is like the ecosystem. Of course, there are other things involved. We can go into that, but this is like the ecosystem and the driving forces that is contributing to much more climate talks and having to build much more better mechanisms that come to address climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. And with that, you would ask me, so how does your enterprise fit within all of this? Right? And again, because I'm also pursuing a master's degree in climate change studies, specifically on the biodiversity conservation and nature-based solutions as it applies in African savannas. So this is a language that I walk and talk,
Yeah.
This
is also an area that I enjoy because biodiversity is biological science background related.
Thank you.
Then it's also a climate space stuff. So this is a nice conversation for the two of us. I'm not sure exactly about the rest of the world, but
yeah, and like this is also just to piggyback off what you said. I have a background in biology. I did business. Now I'm doing climate studies. It's just a way to merge, the science with my business together, and that's something that I really love. Currently I'm making research that is involved in how to empower local communities with investment options to actually invest in nature-based solutions in the north. That's a paper that I'm writing on. That's something that I really, really like to explore. So basically, my company, E-Organics, is a company that's an agri-tech company.
Okay.
What we do is that we collect data from smallholder farmers around their farm size, around their soil quality, soil acidity, soil fertility. And based on that data, we analyze that data to make recommendations for sustainable practices. So if we take data on the farm that says that you have so much soil acidity or alkalinity based on your extensive use of traditional traditional fertilizers, our solution would be apply organic fertilizers over a period of time.
Okay.
When we take data, and we also give weather insights through extension officers to farmers, because those key information is very important to actually making sure that you're farming. Traditionally in Africa, we have a traditional outlook on farming, one that does not involve the mechanization that we are seeing in the West and also in the Americas and etc. We want to bring those solutions to smallholder farmers and make sure that we are maximizing, harvest, but at the same time conserving the environment. And that is what e-organics is all about. And that is what I'm very, very proud to put my money on. So, yeah.
I mean, from what you discussed as well, especially about the fact that after the accord, there was this money inflow that was triggered from the Western world into the underdeveloped or the developing world, and most of the time was fronted by big corporations who probably do not know a lot about the local context and the cultural context. I think what we need is also people like you who are providing local options for the funding that's available to say, look, we are here, we are ready, we have the capacity, we know the people, we know what is best, so fund us instead. Because in the absence of these local options and local funds like your company and others similar to you, most of the time what is then happening is the big guys just look for people within their space and just give them the money to come in.
Exactly. And sometimes corporate social responsibility is structured in a way that only benefits agendas or interests of companies. I'll give you an example. Anglo Gold Ashanti. Or Anglo Gold. It has presence in South Africa. It has presence in Ghana, and it has presence in a lot of places. What they do is that as part of their corporate social responsibility, they have projects in local communities that seek to create schools or provide infrastructure, not solve the issues of exploitation of resources within those areas. So they think that if you can be able to say that the local community is benefiting from employment or infrastructure, it is best to have much more rights to exploit. But the real concern there is the destruction of biodiversity and ecosystems that they are not addressing. So when you have these corporate social responsibilities redirected into projects that look at ecosystem and ecosystem conservation vis-a-vis economic development and etc., then you can be able to say that you are creating impact with regards to the exploitation or the environmental degradation that you are currently doing outside there. And that's very, very crucial to establish,
It's sounding like the old age debate jargon of problem solution mismatch.
Thank you, bro. Wait, tell me what other jargons? Because I know as the debate progresses, there will be jargons. I remember problem solution mismatch. I remember echo chambers. I remember fallback plan.
There's this one. Something window.
Overton window.
Overton window.
That was popularized by Erasmus.
Yes.
He popularized that one.
Yeah, Charlie. Recently, also we heard of principle of water. So maybe you can.
What is that one? Oh my God!
Dela, you remember
my chicken alive. Listen, I have been vindicated.
I saw you post on your status that
I have been vindicated
because you went in class. It was explained by some theory, whatever it is. They still didn't call it chicken analysis.
The amount of embarrassment I had. And the person I feel for was Bannerman because he was my partner at the time.
But that man was defending it. So that's why Dela brings you the chicken analysis. Hey, God. But yeah. I mean, this has been a fun conversation. There's one last question I have for you. I always try to have questions from either books that I'm reading at the time of a conversation or maybe questions that I came across that are interesting. And this one is, I'm reading Trevor Noah's Born in Crime. So,
Okay.
and I just wanted to ask you a question based on a quote that he made. He said, I don't regret anything I've ever done in life, any choice that I've made, but I'm consumed with regret for the things I didn't do, the choices I didn't make, the things I didn't say. We spend so much time being afraid of failure, afraid of rejection, but regret is the thing we should fear most. Failure is an answer, rejection is an answer, but regret is eternal, a question you will never have an answer to. What if only? I wonder what would have been. You will never know, not now, and it would haunt you for the rest of your days. This sent me spinning to ask myself, what decisions was I too scared to make that I regret the most? And I wanted to ask you that question to end the podcast. Are there any decisions, are there any choices, any opportunities you feel you should have taken that you didn't, that you would go on asking, what if? And has that inspired you in terms of how you approach things in the current world?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. I would say that when it comes to making decisions, I don't think I've made any regrets. Of course, in the moment, you would think of what could have or what might have been.
Yeah.
But I think when you think of it in the grander plan, in ultimate picture,
putting it into perspective.
Exactly. When you put it into perspective, you will quite see how all of those decisions were important.
Yeah.
And I think the position that you take to consciously demonize yourself or have to say, you regret this or you regret that is one that is not good, because you have to have the flexibility and you have to have the grace for yourself to be able to admit when you're wrong, even when you're in the future, to a decision that you might have taken in the past, and to obviously see how better you can, develop or make better decisions. But you must understand that all of those things that happened in the past were a way of making sure that you were supposed to be right where you were, and that's something that has really stuck with me, so I think that would be my answer.
Wisdom. The funny part is this episode started with me slightly demonizing you. Now I'm saying you are wise. So but yeah, that's typical definition of how we relate with each other. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much too as well.
Really amazing chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and I also want to say that whoever predicted that the MPP was winning, was quite an interesting prediction. But they could go and look at the results that have been collated and understand that, being delusional.
Just say it.
Yeah, Kelly. Hi, Kelly. If you're watching this podcast, hi. I don't think the MPP would win, but I think maybe if you work hard enough, you can come back after 20 years. Yeah.
20 years, you're petty, eh? But yeah. This has been a really fun conversation, and it's like I always tell people, the best thing about the podcast is getting to learn so much without having to read a book. Like things I've heard from you today are things you've taken years to learn, are things you've read across several papers and several assignments. I didn't have to go through that stress, but I've learned them from you, right? And it makes you so knowledgeable without you having to put in the effort to learn so much. And that's the biggest value. And I've learned a lot from this conversation. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you really for.
Thank you too, Andrews. Thank you very much for having me on this drawing me in on this podcast. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us on this conversation. Leave your comments. I'm sure by now you know how devious he is. So just share your thoughts, whether or not my personality assessment at the start was right. But this is Dela. He's doing amazing work, and I'm glad that he came on the podcast today. So thanks everyone. The debaters would love this one because you've taught them things about climate change that we're going to use in arguments, at least. So yeah, thanks everyone, and see you on the next episode.